I always found that the angle that the discussions around Amberlynn Reid's reaction channels typically take to be very odd. Usually, the critique, whether they be in favor of Amberlynn or the reaction channels, usually focus on the moral or ethical nature of their symbiotic relationships. I call the relationship between Amberlynn and her reaction channels symbiotic because oftentimes, she is one of the few topics that appear on these channels' pages. And in turn, Amberlynn's content is not the most riveting, and I think an argument could be truly made that her channel would not have grown so much had it not been for the reaction channels constantly showcasing her. But the angle focused on the shared relationship between everyone involved in the sphere typically falls very flat for me. If you are unaware what the heck I'm talking about here, Amberlynn Reid is a very prominent figure on the YouTube platform due to her continuously failed weight loss journey and her several controversies ranging from accusations of diet farming to animal and partner abuse. Amberlynn is one leg of what is commonly referred to as Gorl World, which is a term used to describe a group of channels hosted by obese women that people love to watch and react to. The Gorl World doesn't seem to be tied together just because of the similarities that exist between the creators of topics themselves, but it is also held by the reaction channels that surround it, namely Zachary Michael, Alex It Shook, Charlie Gold, as well as compilation channels like Bottle. Despite my seeing the lunacy in the online cycle that is Amberlynn, and despite understanding both the constructive and deconstructive criticisms levied against her, I still find the reaction community that surrounds her to be a bit confounding. Doing what I do best, I wanted to see if I could make an asinine video that would hopefully make people see this area of YouTube a bit differently without demoralizing the reaction channels involved or martyring Amberlynn. When you're looking at any group of creators who make similar content, you'll notice that they tend to have similar aesthetics, similar cadences, etc. Drew Gooden, Danny Gonzalez, Curtis Connor, and Jarvis Johnson are all good representations of this. They are all humorous commentators whose content can connect with diverse audiences across age, race, and gender. You'll notice that they speak in a similar manner and have similarities in their comedic timings. It's not an accident that these fellows are often grouped together. In the Bread 2 genre, Khadijah Limbaugh, FD Signifier, and T Noir often are all tied together due to their frequently Western Black-centric evaluations of media and social anomalies. In the Amberlynn universe, you can identify patterns in content as well outside of the topic itself or herself. Alex Is Shook, Zachary Michael, and Oh Lordy It's Jordy probably have some of the most active fan bases in this universe proportionally to their subscriber counts. A lot of the other highly watched channels are either faceless like Content or Bottle and are more focused on humorous edits and compilations, or they are other commentators who are naturally declining in popularity like Charlie Gold. For the purposes of this analysis, I will be focusing on Alex Is Shook, Zachary Michael, and Oh Lordy It's Jordy simply because they have the most engaged audiences and they seem to be generally well-liked creators outside of their Amberlynn Reid content. Now, this section is titled Social Contracting for a reason. Stay with me here. It is not an accident that three of the most well-liked Amberlynn reaction channels amongst more liberally minded people are all ran by queer people. It wasn't an accident when Charlie Gold and The Sovereign, two Black women, were well received in this genre a few years ago. It's not to say that their popularity and success are completely dependent upon their identities. No, it's more so an evaluation of their audiences, because there is often more trust extended to marginalized people who are discussing, analyzing, critiquing, or making fun of other marginalized people. And yes, I do consider fat people, namely fat women, as marginalized, considering the statistics on their barriers in employment, healthcare, and undeserved decreased social caste. There's a grace that is often extended to marginalized people and a distinct camaraderie that frequently exists because many people greatly assume that you're in community together.
I'm just, don't drop, girl, don't drop. I'm just thinking about the lymphedema and lymphedema stuff and thinking about how specifically what the doctor suggested to her to help with that and like help relieve the symptoms of it and help, do a lot of things to better her experience with lipedema and lymphedema was to eat low carb. And she's literally, this title of this video is her eating cheese balls in bed. Like the probably exact opposite of what her lymphedema doctor would have suggested she do.
I trust the talking scale a lot more than Chantal's half-broken scale.
It's ready.
Yes, it is.
572.
509.0 pounds.
500 and who? Oh, I can look down. 509.
All right. I don't think it's time to celebrate yet. I feel like she's been in the 500s for the longest time now.
Oh my God. Let's step on it again.
508.4 pounds.
508.4.
It's different each time.
Third time. Some triangle hoops. You know, sometimes I do feel decent. I'm like, yes, I need to lose weight. That's all.
Triangle. Now, it's been some time since I took geometry, but if I remember correctly, in Miss Murphy's class, 11, 12 years ago, that's not what a triangle looks like.
I don't really believe that there is a cisgendered straight man whose content substantially relied upon reacting to Amberlynn that he would fare very well. Not unless he is simply cataloging her content with a comedic spin like Mr. Snowflake, or creating a one-off analysis like The Right Opinion. And I am aware of channels that actually do react to her on a frequent basis, like The Cynical Dude, but his channel is not a positive space.
Do you think you'd be treated better if you were smaller? Ugh, yes, I do.
Treated better by society or by your internal organs?
I mean, there's discrimination in workplaces, in healthcare, social settings, like the list can go on and on.
Discrimination in healthcare. You mean when your doctor tells you to lose weight for your health because that's literally their job? Yeah, they are always discriminating against the obese and people on drugs, smokers, alcoholics.
We're not looking at channels like that because they are openly anti-fat. We want to evaluate channels that are presumably not heinous. A continuous flow of outputted work solely angled to make the girlies giggle, rather than to inform or cleverly produce a show and tell, is something that I'm only seeing that a marginalized person can do with ease. Seeking refuge or extending more of the benefit of the doubt to creators who happen to have marginalized identities isn't exactly a rational or logical line of thought, but it is a very human one, especially when the hobby that you're partaking in, which is undoubtedly making fun of fat women in this genre, it probably makes you feel a little less icky. And hold your horses, because as I understand it, the audience of Haydur Nation, a term coined by Amberlynn, I believe, to describe the community that resides around her, Haydur Nation claims to watch reaction channels to circumvent supporting Amberlynn directly. Amberlynn, after all, is a person of many controversies that show an identifiable pattern of behavior that would indicate that she's probably not the greatest person, and if nothing else, is a poor partner to have in a relationship.
I also noticed that she tried to film me in the shower a lot. Not like really showing too much of me, but still kind of showing me. And then I also noticed that she showed my butt crack a lot. I don't know why it is, but I have a long butt crack. I try to keep it maintained, but sometimes it's out. But she didn't have no reason to be posting my butt crack on YouTube. We had gotten to a big fight at some point. I don't know what we were arguing about, but then I think either my mom or my mammy called me about going over there because my mammy was one of my moms, and she was like, hey, we're gonna cook. You guys should come over. And I was like, heck yeah. You know, I hadn't seen my mom in a little while. I was ready to go over there. Well, Amberlynn didn't want to go, and I said, that's fine. You don't have to go. Because, I mean, like I said, all that drama from before with her and my mom, they were just tense. But she didn't want me to go. And she was just like throwing a big just fit. I don't know how else to describe it. She was crying, and I know it was a Code Red Mountain Dew in my hand. She will swear to you that this didn't happen. I've talked to her about it before, and she swears it didn't happen. So I don't know. I was trying to walk out of the house, and I know I had this Code Red Mountain Dew in my hand, and I'm just like, I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna go. So she starts screaming at me from the sliding glass doorway, saying that she's gonna harm herself if I leave, and I don't know, just all this stuff, you know, just going nuts. No, you won't. You know, I said, that's not something to play around with. Just let me go see my mom. And she starts like coming at me, you know, like, ooh, ooh, ooh. So I get in my car and I leave the can on my top of my car, and I close the door real quick and I lock the door, and she's like telling me to get out, all this stuff, and she ends up throwing the can in my car. And I want to say I ended up not going. I don't think I did. I'm like 98% sure I did not go to my mom's. I ended up just going back inside and dealing with her.
Popular commentator and comedian Jamie French recently published a video on her Facebook platform about Amberlynn.
Amberlynn Reid is quite possibly like the most bullied person I have ever seen in the history of social media. Entire YouTube channels exist just to like compile things she does, says, eats. People don't like how she spends her money. People don't like how she tries on clothes. People don't like how she pronounces words.
This video featured her openly questioning as to why Haydur Nation holds so much disdain for what she saw as innocuous content from Amberlynn.
And now let's read comments for my newest video, which I know is gonna be harsh.
Don't do it. Don't do it, girl.
I have grown to have some tough skin, let me tell you.
Even tough skin sometimes is penetrable, and the comments she gets are... they're so hurtful. They hurt me. They give me secondhand hurt.
The last video I uploaded was the spaghetti mukbang.
Oh, we just watched that.
That just went up today, a few hours ago. So first comment I see is from Madison Mukbang, and she says, "Stop it, get some help."
Wait, as in the "stop it, get some help" meme from Michael Jordan that I use? I think this girl meant it in a mean way. It's just funny that I use that meme all the time. Someone quoted her saying, "If you get olives, don't get mayonnaise because olives give you the kick you need." What the F does that even mean? Who cares? Why is that? Why are you so angry?
She was met with a good amount of dissent from voicing this unpopular thought. Well, it's a thought that only seems to be unpopular within Haydur Nation. Most other people don't seem to understand what it is about Amberlynn that makes people create hours and hours of continuous content on her.
I had a whole bag of these.
See, and I guarantee if I scroll down to these comments, people are probably roasting her for eating a whole bag of lentil chips, but I know people that could put away 2 bags.
Sure.
Says, "I love sharing food," said the girl with the most food aggression I've ever witnessed in a human being. Oh yeah, there's like entire compilations of people saying that she has food aggression. I don't even really know what that is. When I think of food aggression, I think of my dog who would like... if another dog walked by his food bowl. I've never witnessed her acting like that, but people are mad.
Okay, all right. Okay, because I was about to say, she's aware that people have this conversation about her having food aggression, and she's like, but I've never seen it. I've never seen it. But people are bad. Well, girl, you just said there were entire compilations. Why don't you go click on it? Why don't you just go click on it then? You know, like I think that's going to be my problem with this whole thing. It's just that like she's presenting a small sample of what Amberlynn's content is, and certainly there are people that probably are way too upset about some of these things, and certainly there are people that probably have way too much of an issue with this. But it's like a small sample of Amberlynn's content. Just the tip of the iceberg, really, when you go down the rabbit hole that is things that Amberlynn has done on her channel that have been scandalous in the past.
Many of the comments Jamie French received held sentiments of Amberlynn being a bad person and therefore deserving the reaction channels around her. It seems that there is a popular idea of the reaction channels serving as a check and balance for Amberlynn, or as just serving as conduits of information for their audiences so they can stay up to date with the present day happenings of Amberlynn. But my question to that has always been, why? Normally, if someone is revealed to be what is popularly outlined as a bad person, or even an abusive person if the allegations from Amberlynn's exes stand to be true, most of the time, we would see critical commentary videos or video essays discussing as to why people should discontinue their continued watching of that creator. There's normally a campaign of deplatforming or trying to cause an overall reduction in the influencer's cash flow, i.e. a loss of revenue via decreased views or a loss of revenue via lack of public awareness. Normally, when people are really off-put by a creator, they don't seek out content on a routine basis for said creator. Haydur Nation's tendency to keep up with Amberlynn despite them seeing her as a deplorable person doesn't follow the same patterns as a genuine cancellation. Instead, it would seem this counter community caused Amberlynn to grow, and as a result, more people are actually aware of her. Kind of counterintuitive. You know, many fat activists frequently argue that fat phobia is rooted in racism.
Here's your reminder that fat phobia is rooted in racism. As always, if you haven't read this book, go do that.
And I tend to disagree because I find it to be an oversimplified version of the culture, even within the United States alone. I also don't love that it is frequently utilized amongst white feminists as a gotcha moment, rather than as a historical evaluation of how the concept of fat phobia could be argued to be degrading to Black women specifically, and as a harsh form of discipline and subservience to all other women, mainly white women. I don't even believe that they believe what they're saying half the time, because they are so frequently unable to link this theory to modern day precedent for anyone outside of themselves. However, I do tend to agree to the academic assertion that symbolic racism and symbolic anti-fatness are structurally similar. Symbolic racism has a wide array of definitions, but the crux of it is the conjunction of traditional values and racist negative effects towards minority groups. In 1994, Christian S. Crandall theorized that prejudice towards fat people can be associated with 1. Belief in values that reflect self-determination and the Puritan work ethic, 2. Measures of intolerance, and 3. Self-interest that should be uncorrelated with anti-fat attitudes in terms of one's own fatness. Meaning, because fatness is often viewed solely as a controllable attribute that can be rectified through hard and honest work, fat people are often regarded as lazy, sinful, lacking in discipline, and in self-denial. If the endorsement of this traditional Puritan conservative set of beliefs underlies both racist and anti-fat attitudes, then racism should be correlated with anti-fat prejudice. And please do diligently note that this does not necessarily suggest anti-fat rhetoric comes from and is caused by the existence of racism, particularly anti-Blackness. But the two concepts are still irrevocably linked. The ideological assumption that people get what they deserve and deserve what they get is a fundamental component to both prejudices. The true point that I'm making here is that on television, fat women are frequently figures of fun, occasionally villainous, often bad examples of people with no self-control or low self-esteem. And when this is the culture that you've grown up in and have adopted, how can you not expect people to look at these reaction channels and say, yeah, they have implicit biases against fat women? I'm willing to bet that some people would probably point out that some of the reaction channels are ran by creators who are more on the fat side. However, in return, I would counter with, it is consistently suggested that there is no evidence that fat people display an in-group bias when it comes to expressing prejudice about fat people, which is also a large inconsistency with structural racism, mind you, which often propagates an in-group bias as a means of protection. This is to say that several studies have suggested that fat people do not frequently come to the defense of fat people. The phenomenon of the ever-pervasive fat acceptance girlies on TikTok is pretty new. Sure, the fat liberation and the NAAFA existed in the 60s, but they weren't nearly as transformative and as influential as the girlies on TikTok. It doesn't matter that some of the Gorl World commentators are fat or would be considered fat. What matters is that people are unwilling to see how this type of content is very indicative of the very accepted cultural precedent of viewing fat people as nothing but entertainment. Zachary Michael, Alex Shook, and Oh Lordy It's Jordy do not have to utter a single word of malice or overtly showcase fat-phobic behaviors because the simple action of them making a constant stream of reaction content around fat people is enough to suggest an implicit bias. An implicit bias does not mean one is a bad person and you need to be thrown off a cliff. It means that we have uncritically accepted a societal normative that has been consistently linked to active forms of discrimination throughout our society. And when you constantly battle against this type of critique due to reasoning like, oh well, Alex didn't call Chantel a fat, lazy piece of shit, you are also inadvertently co-signing the continued uncritical consumption of many other subtly bigoted forms of media. And the word you should be very much focused on here is uncritical. The infamous reality TV show 90 Day Fiancé reinforces the stereotype that foreigners willfully utilize Americans' desperation for relationships with the sole goal of obtaining a green card.
When you have money, that's when she spreads her legs. Yeah, walk away because you're a little girl. You need to grow up.
You don't know anything.
The way the show is presented to us insists upon notions of the gold digger mentality. Simultaneously, it also exposes many Americans as highly transactional in these sorts of relationships, but they are also able to victimize themselves because their partners don't love them, since the transactional part is often not spoken out loud. This is an assumption that many of us have made about Americans who intentionally seek relationships with a person from a completely different culture whose home nation just happens to be in economic uncertainty. These Americans seem to be seeking some sort of definitive power imbalance, or they have a savior complex. 90 Day Fiancé made this notion unquestionable with figures like Big Ed. Because reality TV's first and only goal is money, they will show whatever mess that will sell. If you're watching reality TV with a critical eye, you will both be able to see how it reflects and perpetuates societal stereotypes of all kinds, but you will also be able to confirm why these stereotypes are not true. Amidst the messy couples of 90 Day Fiancé, we also see couples who genuinely seem to love each other and are doing everything in their power to make it work. This duality can and does exist in Amberlynn Reid and Gorl World content as well. Sure, I do believe the reaction channels whose content sways more into revolving around fat people, and the audience members of these reaction channels most certainly interact with this content because of their implicit bias against fat people, but I also don't believe it is necessarily out of malignant self-interest, nor should it be seen as valueless content. And I say that because other creators have stated that the reason people watch Gorl World so diligently is because they want to feel better about themselves. I would actually argue that that's everyone, whether they are experiencing content positively or negatively. But I am aware that the point being made, more than likely, is that they believe the Gorl World audience just wants someone to shit on because they're bored with their own lives, and to their credit, this sentiment does exist. However, the Gorl World seems to draw in many liberally minded people, and this point is wrapping back to my first section. On this channel, just because you're left-leaning does not paint you as a good person in my book. I could care less about your political affiliation. It doesn't necessarily speak to your character as a person. My point that Gorl World attracts people who identify with leftist politics has nothing to do with morality. It has everything to do with left-leaning people typically understanding systemic issues and implicit bias. And yet, they are engaging with something that is undoubtedly the pinnacle of the fat people are entertainment trope. I could chop this up to an inconsistency in values, but that's too easy, and it's probably not very true. What I believe is happening here, we're seeing people who are aware of these social parameters participate in them because they believe those parameters do not actually apply in this specific instance. The logic to this is, Amberlynn Reid is a fat woman who experiences prejudice. But Amberlynn is also a bad, thoughtless person, so therefore, she probably experiences many of her plights not because she is fat and without means, but because she is a bad person. It plays on both structural imbalances and individual responsibility. Haydur Nation is probably one of the best examples of people trying to constantly contend with their implicit biases while retaining their true opinions on the subject at hand. In this case, Amberlynn. When they are met with criticism, they immediately pull out all the stops and detail every single horrible thing Amberlynn has ever done on YouTube. And at first, I thought I was seeing a hindsight bias form, as in the audience don't like Amberlynn or are initially despondent because they refuse to acknowledge their implicit bias, so they then find things to support the reason why they don't like her. And while this could still be very much true for newcomers to the Gorl World, I don't think it's true for the veterans because Amberlynn started getting into controversies almost from the very beginning. The first big scandal that imploded the Gorl World was Amberlynn's presumably false allegation towards her ex that she consistently misgendered under the defense that he wasn't trans at the time she dated him.
Was with a girl named I feel very strongly about this, and I feel like it's okay for me to say her name because she's transgender now, so she's not Cassidy no longer, so I'm able to say her name because she's a once was person. Like, he is no longer here anymore, obviously. I'm not gonna say his new name because we're talking about her. Transgender talk is too confusing, so we're just gonna leave it as that. His mom let me live there, and it was a very small apartment. I'm talking like, I think it was like 450 square feet. Cassidy and I ended up having to use the living room as our bedroom. It was just, it wasn't good, but I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna live with my girlfriend. Like, we're so in love. It's like so amazing. And
everything in that video was such bull that I can't even describe the bullshit that was in that video. Can't even.
With this in mind, it does become harder to argue that there's a strong hindsight bias for the veterans and OGs. Amberlynn is famous because she's fat. She would not have this intense community. She would not be such a prominent figure if she was not fat. Even removed from her controversy surrounding her failed weight loss journeys, this would still be true. And really quickly on the failed weight loss journey and diet culture crap, this is the dumbest critique I have seen of Amberlynn. Sure, the argument can be made that she constantly picked up and put down different weight loss programs because maybe she saw how well it did for her views, but just because an argument can be made doesn't mean that I will agree with it. Her weight loss journeys, whether they were staged or not, follow the same patterns of many people's failed attempts to lose weight. A 2019 study suggested that popular weight loss diets simply do not work for most people, or more accurately, they are moderately effective for a while, but after a year or so, the benefits are largely gone. Even within the first 6-month time frame, this presents an issue to particularly Americans. We are raised with the expectation of immediacy. Because of that, most people don't want to wait to lose weight healthily. That's why these programs pop up in the first place. When these diets fail or the weight comes back, people dive headfirst into yo-yo dieting. As disenchanting as it may seem for some of you guys, Amberlynn is exactly what you can expect weight loss to look like for most people: inconsistent and naive. And the naivete comes from the lack of understanding that these diet programs are not compatible with your specific body and your specific goals. To me, Amberlynn's goal and everyone's goal should not actually be to only lose weight, but to establish a maintainable and sustainable healthy lifestyle that actually suits your needs. That being said, Amberlynn is famous because she's fat, but she is also infamous because she is controversial. She is not simply controversial because of her scandals, though. She is controversial in her existence and monetary success on the platform in general. A lot of people say that Amberlynn's large platform is glorifying obesity, and while I don't believe that, I do think her existence normalizes it, and that alone is controversial to some. Her low effort vlog shows a day-to-day life of a very, very average person who happened to gain access to a highly profitable platform. She doesn't do anything too big or anything at all on most days. Amberlynn's life is slow, often unchanging, and quite boring. She makes her money literally sitting down and doing nothing. And that's absolutely infuriating to me. But I can also appreciate it in a weird way because she is, at her core, a fat queer woman existing. That's something that we are not frequently shown on TV without a certain narrative being spun around it. And also, inadvertently, her lazy content keeps alive a theme on YouTube that has been fizzling out over the last several years: unregulated authenticity to the point of fault. The Gorl World is odd and riddled with many biases that I, albeit optimistically, think people are trying to confront. People in that space can be very nasty, but the leading creators do try to create some type of positivity in their content and even around Amberlynn. While they do exist to solely make fun of her, they also add a lightheartedness to Amberlynn and unwittingly help regulate people's anger towards her ability to make money, probably in one of the most lazy ways ever conceived. On the flip side of that, they also remove some of the levity to some of Amberlynn's existing accusations. I hope that this video has in some way served as a way to deconstruct the Amberlynn universe in a way that holds to my initial promises of not demoralizing the reaction creators while also not martyring Amberlynn. Critical content will always carry an air of negativity simply because that is the nature of it, but because my moral principles are largely gray and forever changing, I find it unnecessary to rely on arguments of these reaction channels being immoral. At the end of the day, this type of content will always exist, so we might as well see what we can learn from it. And that is all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. Bye.